Stephanie, she was a mistake, a failure. Can you believe it? That's what my mother said about me. Right in the middle of the promotion party for the son she's always been proud of. That son is Adrian, my older brother. Growing up, I was always in his shadow. Constant comparisons, constantly being told I wasn't good enough. I used to think that was the extent of it. Some teasing, a bit of favoritism. I could deal with that. But no. Right in front of nearly 60 guests, my mother openly called me a mistake. Like it was something she was proud to say. Like it wasn't the kind of thing that could kill a person from the inside. And in that moment, I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up not to argue, but to hold on to the last shred of dignity I had left. This is my story, and when it's over, tell me, was I wrong for choosing to walk my path? Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie. I'm 32 years old and the founder of Harbor Tech Solutions, a startup specializing in automation and data management. If I had to talk about the success I've achieved today, the first thing I should probably do is thank my family. Not for lifting, supporting, or standing by me through tough times, but for the betrayal, the humiliation, and the rejection, because those were the things that pushed me to keep going every day. Ever since I was a kid, I've lived in the shadow of my older brother, Adrian. Adrian is 4 years older than me. He was always the one our parents were proud of. In their eyes, Adrian was the accomplished son, calm, capable, the kind of person others naturally listened to. At every family gathering, his name would echo in compliments and praise, and me, I'd sit quietly beside him like part of the background in their perfect picture. I used to believe that time would change things once we grew up, got jobs, and lived our own lives. Maybe our parents would see me differently, that someday, even just for a moment, they'd feel proud of me too, because I was their daughter. But no, even after I graduated, got a job, and started standing on my own 2 feet, their eyes were still fixed on Adrian. And their pride in him was so blinding, they didn't just ignore me. They called me a mistake 3 years ago in the middle of his promotion party. And it was at that very moment I realized with a family like that, who needs enemies? I still remember that day clearly. It was a weekend in late March. That day, I came home early at my mother's request. At first, I had no intention of attending, partly because my company had only been around for just over a year. Finances were shaky, and I hadn't had a real day off in months. The other reason, I knew exactly who the star of the evening would be. When I declined, using work as an excuse, my mother, Ella, replied with just one line, her voice calm and cool. "Don't make your absence something your father and I must be ashamed of." So I dropped everything, rearranged my schedule, and came back for the party. Adrian had just been appointed deputy CFO at a major real estate company. By the time I arrived, most of the relatives had already arrived. The room was buzzing, glasses clinking, voices laughing, people surrounding him like he just walked off a movie set. Some congratulated him, others praised him, and someone even said, "Adrian is the pride of our whole family." And among the crowd raising their glasses, I saw my parents beaming, eyes full of pride, as if all the burdens of their life had been lifted by those 2 words, promoted. At first, I just planned to find a quiet corner, sit through the night, and slip out unnoticed, like I always did. But I was wrong. No matter how calm I stayed, or how well I tried to disappear, they'd always find a way to drag me out into the spotlight. In the middle of the party, my mother, caught up in the excitement, grabbed the mic to make a toast. She began with a few heartfelt words about Adrian. Then someone from the family shouted from the crowd, "What about Stefani? I heard she's doing well too." At that moment, I thought maybe she'd say something like, "Stephani's doing well, but not like Adrian." Or maybe, "She's okay, I guess." But no. Instead, she said flatly, "Stephanie, she was a mistake, a failure." Then she laughed, raising her wine glass as if she'd just delivered the punchline to a holiday joke. She added, "Just kidding. Today is Adrian's big day. Let's not bring Stephanie into it." Laughter rippled through the room. I stood in the middle of all the noise and warm yellow lights, feeling like a stranger who'd stumbled into a celebration she was never invited to. After what my mother said, I knew I didn't need to stay another minute. I got up, put on my coat, didn't say goodbye to anyone, didn't care if anyone noticed. I just walked out the door, leaving the noise and laughter behind. A few steps behind me, I heard someone call out sharply, "Stephanie, stop right there!" It was my mother. She and my father hurried over, looking uneasy, like they were more worried about how this would look to others than what was happening. She came up close and spoke in a low, forced, calm voice. "The party's just getting started. Where do you think you're going?" I looked her straight in the eyes and answered without hesitation. My voice wasn't loud, but there was no backing down in it. "This is Adrian's night. There's no reason for me to stay here to be the punchline to some cheap joke or to let people look at me like I'm something to pity." Right after I said that, my father stepped forward, clearly annoyed. "It was just a joke. You're being too sensitive." I turned to him, held my gaze, and spoke slowly. Every word carefully measured, like they'd been waiting for years. "If tonight, right here at this party, Mom called you useless in front of everyone, how would that feel?" He didn't have time to answer. My mother jumped in quickly, cutting him off. "Don't drag your father into this. If you don't want to be called a mistake, earn your place. Be more like Adrian, for example." I let out a quiet laugh, not out of humor, but the hollow laugh that comes from being dismissed so many times. It no longer hurts, just exhausts. I took a deep breath, then looked her in the eye and said clearly, "From now on, you have one child, Adrian. Call him when you need something. As for me, the mistake you talked about, you'd better stay away from me if you don't want to keep feeling ashamed." And with that, I turned around and walked away, unbothered by the stares around me. About an hour later, I got home, a small house on the outskirts of San Jose where I've lived for years. It's not fancy or impressive, but it's quiet enough for me to breathe, work, and sometimes fall apart without anyone watching. As soon as I walked in, I made a cup of coffee. I needed something strong enough to keep me grounded, and in the thin swirl of steam rising from the cup, old memories began to play, like a tape rewinding on its own. I remember a time when I was 7. Adrian's birthday happened to fall on a weekend. My parents threw a big backyard party. Cake, confetti, even a balloon artist. I sat alone on the steps unnoticed. I quietly asked my mom if I'd get a birthday like that. She said, "You were born on a weekday? Who has time for that?" Then there was another time when I was around 9. We had guests over. Excited, I ran down to the living room, but my mother grabbed my arm and whispered, "Go upstairs." I told them we only have one son, Adrian. It's not the right time. I didn't understand why back then. I remember standing still in my room the whole afternoon, afraid to leave. When I was 17, I got a full scholarship for a summer program at an East Coast university. I came home excitedly, thinking this time maybe they'd be proud. I handed them the acceptance letter. My dad glanced at it, then set it down and said, "Adrian got invited to intern in Boston when he was your age. A summer program isn't that big of a deal." I don't remember what I said back. All I remember is that from that moment on, I stopped expecting recognition from them. And with every moment like that, a quiet decision began to grow in me. The plan to leave that house behind the moment I turned 18. When I turned 18, I was fortunate enough to earn a full scholarship to study information technology at a university in California. That year, I didn't tell them anything. I didn't show them my acceptance letter or mention my sleepless nights writing applications. I already knew no matter how hard I tried, I would always be Adrian's shadow in their eyes. I came home, sat at the dinner table, and said plainly that I'd be moving out and covering my school expenses. At first, I thought they'd react somehow, at the very least, ask where I'd be studying or whether I needed help. But after I told them about my decision, my mother gave a slight nod and kept scrolling on her phone. My father said just one thing. "That's good. You should be independent." Exactly 1 week later, I left that house. No one saw me off. No one told me to take care or to come back and visit often. The months that followed weren't easy. While the scholarship covered most of my tuition and fees, I still had to cover my living expenses. I worked whatever jobs I could after class. Some days I was on library duty. Others I cleaned trays in the dining hall. During summers, I picked up data entry gigs or helped with tech support at small school-run workshops. Thanks to those jobs and my frugal lifestyle, I was lucky to get by without borrowing money from anyone. Thankfully, those 4 years passed. I graduated with a decent GPA and landed a job just 1 week later. It was a small company, but I had a lot of opportunities to learn. My parents never sent me a single dollar throughout my college experience, and even during my early working years, they never called to ask if I was doing okay or if I needed anything. They only called for holidays like Christmas, Thanksgiving, or occasionally Adrian's birthday. And every time I went home, not because I wanted to see them, but because if I didn't, my mother would say the same old line, "Don't make your absence something we must be ashamed of." After working for about 5 years, I'd saved up a modest amount. It wasn't much, but it was enough to live comfortably and set aside a little cushion. At that point, I had no plans to start a business. I thought I'd keep working in a stable environment, earning a steady paycheck, and moving forward one stage at a time. But the deeper I got into the industry, the more I saw the gaps, inefficiencies, and missed opportunities. I realized that if there were more straightforward, more affordable, and more accessible systems in place, small businesses wouldn't have to pay the kind of ridiculous costs I'd seen firsthand. So I made a decision to start my own company. Something small, just enough so I wouldn't have to keep working for people I didn't respect. In the beginning, things moved slowly but steadily. I worked nearly around the clock, handling everything myself, from contracts and accounting to website design. But within a few months, the financial reality became unavoidable. I had already poured most of my savings into keeping things afloat, which wasn't enough. Eventually, I had to mortgage my house, the only thing I could call my own. The bank approved a loan of up to $170,000. After borrowing everything I could from friends and people I trusted, I was still $20,000 short, just enough to keep the company running for another 6 months. At that point, I had no other choice. I swallowed my pride and went back to see my parents, hoping, just hoping, they might extend a hand. I had played out every possible scenario in my mind before that day. I still remember that moment clearly, sitting across from my parents in the house where I grew up. I explained everything, why I needed the $20,000, how I planned to use it, and what it could mean for the future of my company. As soon as I finished, they didn't respond with words of concern or support. They laughed. My father leaned back in his chair, shook his head slightly, and said, "You're not like Adrian. Don't burn money on something that foolish." My mother quickly followed. "Adrian's managing a whole team of employees. He's loaded with experience, and he still hasn't opened his own company. What makes you think you can do it?" I didn't say a word, but something inside me started to turn. A strange mix of numbness and hurt, flowing backward like a tide. She looked at me for a moment, then added, this time, as a conclusion, "We'd rather invest in Adrian. At least he's competent. If we lost money with him, we wouldn't regret it." I didn't react. I calmly tried again, this time offering them equity. I told them I'd count it as an investment if they lent me the $20,000. They'd own 5% of the company. Still, they shook their heads. When I couldn't persuade them of the opportunity, I pulled out a loan contract I had already printed. I offered to borrow the $20,000 with interest at the same rate they'd get from a bank. Maybe it was the way I handed over that paper or the steady tone in my voice. Whatever it was, something made them pause. After a few minutes of silence, they agreed. That day, I walked out of that house with a sign and loan agreement and a single unwavering resolution. I had to succeed, not to prove anything to them. But so, I'd never have to walk back into that house again with my head down. As I sat there, coffee half cold in my hands, and my mind still caught in the wave of memories that had just resurfaced, my phone buzzed. A new notification from the extended family group chat. Our family has its group. Something that started when we still use Facebook Messenger, moved to iMessage, and eventually settled on WhatsApp. It includes nearly everyone on my dad's side. Uncles, aunts, cousins, almost 30 people, like a noisy marketplace, always buzzing. I opened the group with a sinking feeling. And I was right. At the top, I saw a new video posted by Luke, my cousin, 6 years younger than me. It was a clip from the promotion party showing my mother standing in front of the mic, beaming as she said, "Siephanie, she was a mistake, a failure." The video then cut seamlessly to the moment I put on my coat and walked out of the party. It was less than a minute long, but edited so cleanly that it felt intentional, like someone wanted to make a point. Below the video, Luke had left a comment. "Some people aren't talented, but the second someone speaks a little truth, they storm off in tantrums." Reading that, I realized something I'd known deep down for years. To them, I was never anything more than a name they could throw around for laughs. Right after that, I downloaded the video to my phone. I didn't say anything in the group. I just saved it like a kind of medicine so that on the days I felt tired or lost, I could watch it again and remember exactly how deeply I was dismissed and use that to keep going. What I didn't know then was that saving that small clip would later become the very thing that saved me from the biggest collapse of my life. The next morning at 7, I was in the kitchen, still stirring my coffee when the doorbell rang. I walked over to open it, and there they were. My father, my mother, and Adrian were standing on the doorstep. They hadn't called, hadn't texted. They just showed up like I was obligated to open the door and receive them. Without a word, I stepped aside and let them in. The moment they crossed the threshold, my mother's voice rose tight with anger. "You must be real proud of yourself, huh? Walking out of the party like that, the whole family is talking. You've embarrassed us." I looked at her for a few seconds and said calmly, but without backing down, "The moment you called me a mistake in front of everyone last night, I stopped being part of this family. So whether I stayed or walked out, it's none of your business anymore." Right after that, my father stepped forward, his voice sharp and direct. "If that's how you feel, return the $20,000 we lent you to start your business." I answered immediately, my voice steady, every word measured. I didn't take a handout. I took a loan, a 2-year term with interest in writing. Don't forget that. Give me 2 months. I'll pay it off early to the last cent. As I finished speaking, Adrian jumped in, his tone laced with sarcasm. "You should pay it off soon because judging by how you're running that little company, I doubt it'll survive that long." I turned to face him, voice low but clear. "If my company goes under, I'll own that failure. But if I make it, then what happened last night will be the prologue to a story none of you will want to hear the rest of." My mother stepped forward right after that, her eyes fixed coldly on mine. She said, voice like ice, "Just don't turn yourself into a joke in front of the family." I didn't even need to think. The words came out on their own like a reflex. And if they talk about me one day, at least that time, they'll have to think twice before laughing. Silence fell. No one said another word, and they left soon after because they knew there was nothing left here they could control. After they left, I sat alone in my living room. I didn't need more time to think. I already knew. I had no one else I could borrow from. The bank had already lent me everything it legally could. To pay them back, I had precisely 2 options. 1, sell the company, my brainchild, the thing I'd poured nearly 2 years into building. 2, sell the house I was living in, use that money to pay off the bank loan, and then pay back my parents. I spent the entire day weighing the 2, hour by hour, back and forth, and I knew by the late afternoon, when the sunlight outside had softened into a gentle gold through the leaves in front of the porch, I chose to sell the house. Because if I had to give something up to protect something else, I'd rather lose the roof over my head than give up the thing I'd built with my own 2 hands. That same evening, I called Ethan, a close friend who works in real estate in California. I told him everything, the debt, the 2-month deadline, and the decision I'd come to. He didn't ask many questions. He just said, "Send me the address and the paperwork. I'll move fast. I'll only take half my usual commission. Consider it me helping you stay standing." I paused for a few seconds, then hung up. 2 weeks later, Ethan called back. His voice sounded relieved. "Got a buyer. Good price. $250." I closed my eyes for a moment, not out of regret, but of relief. After clearing the bank loan and paying the necessary fees, I had just enough left to transfer $23,000 to my parents with a bit left over to keep the company going for a little while longer. I bought that house a few years ago in a quiet suburb far from central San Jose. I got it because it was cheap and just enough for me to start fresh. Ethan said I could have sold it for more if I'd waited a few months, but I had told him from the beginning I needed the money fast, so that price was good enough. The same day I received the sale payment, I called my father to ask for their bank account number. Right after I sent the money, he didn't ask anything, just replied with a single message. "Good. A woman who keeps her word is worth respecting." And at that moment, I realized something. I had just bought myself closure. I felt lucky. Not because I paid them back, but because it was over. No one owed anyone anything, not even a cent. The day after I sent the transfer, I closed every remaining door between myself and my family. My parents' phone numbers, the family group chat, and even the addresses I had kept just in case disappeared from my devices and my mind. At that point, my company was still alive, but barely breathing. After selling the house, the money I had left gave me just a few more months of runway. And in that time, I had a choice. Let everything slide into collapse or fight to pull it back with everything I had left. I chose the second. I started reviewing every expense, combing through the client list, and cutting out anything that drained my time or resources. I stopped marketing aimlessly. I stopped waiting for goodwill from anyone. I learned how to get straight to the point in every meeting. I trimmed down my pitch from 10 pages to 3, focusing only on what the client needed to hear and offering solutions in the first conversation. Back then, I didn't dream of some huge breakthrough. I just wanted to survive each month, grow a little every quarter, and see my systems become more stable with each passing year. And then, through relentless effort, I reached my first real turning point. A major contract came in from a co-working space chain based in California. We sealed the deal after just 3 meetings. They needed a simple, secure, and cost-efficient internal data management system. My solution delivered all 3. That contract became a launchpad. From a startup once valued at around $500,000, my company was revalued at nearly $5 million less than a year later. After that milestone, I didn't throw a big celebration. No parties, no flashy social media posts. What I did instead was immediately audit the entire system from top to bottom. I began restructuring the company. I didn't want this success to be a lucky wave that crests and crashes. I needed it to become a strong foundation that would hold for years to come. During that period, a few local startup-focused publications in the Bay Area reached out and asked to interview me. They said my story could inspire young people starting from scratch, especially those with no support system or backing from family. I gladly accepted. If my journey could help someone keep going, I was more than willing to share it. At the time, I thought I had moved on, that I had closed the door on a past defined by people who once called me a mistake, a failure. What I didn't realize was that a storm was quietly making its way back. And this time, it started with the hands I had once called family. The storm hit just 1 week after I agreed to that interview. It was the beginning of the work week. I had just wrapped up a short meeting with the customer service team when my office phone rang, an internal line from the front desk. The receptionist's voice came through slightly hesitant. "Ms. Sifani, there are 3 people here. They say they're your parents and older brother." I paused for a moment before responding. Then I told her to bring them to the guest meeting room, which I usually reserve for big clients. I didn't want personal matters bleeding into the company's day-to-day atmosphere. A few minutes later, the door opened. The 3 of them walked in. They hadn't changed, not even a simple hello. Once seated, my father was the first to speak. His voice echoed slightly as he glanced around the room. "Nice office." Then my mother added, her tone softer but strangely hollow, "I'm proud of you." And then Adrian spoke as if this entire visit had been rehearsed in advance. "I think you should hire me as your CFO. It's efficient, and it would give you peace of mind." Nearly 3 years since we'd last seen each other, and not one of them asked how I'd been, how I was living, if I was okay. All they cared about was what they could gain. I looked at each of them in turn and asked directly, "Why are the 3 of you here?" No one dodged the question. Adrian went straight to the point. "We're here to claim what's ours. The family wants 10% of your company, and you need to make room for me as your chief financial officer." I stared at him for a few seconds and then laughed. A real laugh, the kind that rises from somewhere deep. I laughed so hard I had to lean forward and let out a slight cough. The 3 of them just looked at me confused, unsure what to make of it. A few moments later, I regained my composure, adjusted my posture, and spoke with a serious tone. "On what grounds are you making that demand?" Before I even finished the question, Adrian jumped in with a response that sounded rehearsed. "If Mom and Dad hadn't given you that $20,000 back then, you would have gone bankrupt, and I'm your older brother. Me taking the CFO position makes sense." I gave a slight nod and replied immediately, my voice sharp and deliberate, like a gavel hitting the table. "Sounds like you forgot to brush your teeth before leaving the house this morning. That $20,000 wasn't a gift. It was a loan with paperwork, and I paid back $23,000 principal and interest." I paused for a moment, giving my words time to land. Then I continued, this time with zero restraint, no room left for courtesy. "And as for you calling yourself my brother, I'm sorry. I don't have a brother, and I no longer have parents either, because no parent stands up in front of 60 people and calls their child a mistake, a failure." The room went heavy, thick with tension. My mother glanced sideways at Adrian, and this time he snapped back with more bite. "Even if you did pay interest, without that $20,000, your company would have crashed. You owe that success to us, whether you admit it or not. Show some gratitude." Just as those words left his mouth, there was a knock on the door. All three of them flinched. I didn't turn around. I said calmly and firmly, "Come in." The door opened, and in walked Brian, my attorney. I had called him the moment the receptionist told me who had arrived. After Brian entered the room, he gave them a polite nod, set his briefcase on the table across from me, and calmly sat. Once he was settled, I turned to him and said, "Brian, I'd like you to document everything here today officially. I'll also provide all the evidence related to the $20,000 loan, contract, receipts for both principal and interest, and the message confirming repayment from 3 years ago." Brian nodded. He pulled a small voice recorder from his case, turned it on, and clearly stated the date, time, and location. He also noted the presence of 3 individuals connected to a past personal loan arrangement. Then he turned to my parents and Adrian. His tone was calm, but every word landed like stone on glass. Based on the information and documents my client has provided, the loan in question was repaid in full, both principal and interest 3 years ago. Currently, there are no remaining financial obligations between either party. After a brief pause, he continued, "From this point forward, I will serve as Sifani's legal representative in all unwanted contact matters. If you attempt to damage my client's reputation, image, or business operations, intentionally or otherwise, we will take appropriate legal action without hesitation." None of them said a word. They didn't argue, didn't push back, realizing they no longer held any ground. All 3 stood up a moment later. Just as they reached the door, Adrian turned his head, throwing one last remark over his shoulder. "Don't think you've gotten away with this. I'm not done with you." Brian remained beside me, unmoving. He didn't flinch, didn't even blink. He placed one steady hand on my shoulder, a quiet, deliberate gesture. "You did the right thing. Leave the rest to me." That afternoon, right at the start of the second half of the day, Adrian dug himself a hole so deep he'd never claw his way out. I had warned him, but bitterness can blind people faster than a misstep ever could. Around 2 p.m., I was reviewing our new quarters rollout plan when the door to my office burst open. Lauren, my assistant, walked in, pale-faced, phone trembling. Her voice was urgent. "Stephanie, you need to see this now." She handed me her phone. The screen was already open to a Reddit post in the family drama subreddit. The title hit me straight in the chest. Stephanie Whitmore, the ungrateful daughter who turned her back on her parents after making it big. Below the title was a long post written like a heartfelt plea for a family wronged. It painted a picture of me taking money from my family to start my company, then turning cold, cutting ties, and even banning them from visiting my office. The last line of the post read, clearly written by a brother who gave his youth to help someone who only returned betrayal. My heartbeat didn't spike, but my mind locked in like a laser. I scrolled down. The post had only been up for less than 10 minutes, but the engagement was exploding. Over 200 comments, most filled with rage, calling me an ungrateful child, a phony CEO, a backstabber who bit the hand that fed her. Lauren's voice shook as she added, "It's on Facebook too. Same post. It's spreading fast in those family drama groups." Within minutes, my customer service line started lighting up. I heard the department manager shouting from the hallway, "Stephanie, we're getting spammed with 1-star reviews on Google. Some clients are calling in directly asking what's going on." Right then, I knew I was staring down a storm that, if not handled precisely, could blow my entire career off the map. I looked at Lauren and said firmly, "Call Brian. I need him here now." She nodded and rushed out, leaving me in the room to think carefully, quickly about what my next move needed to be. While waiting for Brian to arrive, I sat alone in my office. I knew that if I wanted to shut the storm down, I'd need a response sharp enough, clear enough, that every lie would snap in half on impact. The first thing that came to mind was the loan. I had the contract, the transfer receipts, and even my father's written confirmation. But that alone wouldn't be enough to bury their narrative. Then it hit me. The meeting this morning. The guest room had security cameras installed. My parents and Adrian had sat right there across from me in front of my lawyer and said everything, and it had all been recorded. I immediately picked up the internal line and called Lauren. "Get tech support. Tell them to extract the full security footage from this morning's meeting in room 3. I need it ASAP." As soon as I hung up, another thought slammed into me, like someone had just yanked open a dusty drawer in the back of my mind. The video 3 years ago. My cousin had posted it in the family group chat, the one where my mother stood at the mic laughing, calling me a mistake in front of everyone. I had downloaded it back then. I hadn't watched it in a long time, but I never deleted it. I opened my phone gallery and scrolled through old videos. There it was. I leaned back in my chair, quietly exhaling. I had everything I needed. All that was left was for Brian to walk through the door, and the rest I'd let my lawyer take from here. 20 minutes later, Brian walked into my office. The moment he saw me, he raised an eyebrow, probably because no tension was left in my face. Quite the opposite. There was a quiet clarity in my eyes, something unmistakable. At the same time, I called Lauren in. I didn't say much. I handed them what I had: the bank statements and the original loan agreement, the video of my mother calling me a mistake at Adrian's promotion party, the footage from this morning's office meeting clearly showing everything they said. After going through it all, Brian looked up and said, "I see exactly what you're aiming for. Leave the rest to me." Lauren gave a slight nod. She didn't need further instructions. All the materials were forwarded to our internal communications team just minutes later. I didn't go to the mainstream media. I went right back to where it all started: social media. 20 minutes later, the evidence began appearing across the platforms where the false narrative had spread: Reddit, Facebook, and even Instagram. The headline was clean: no drama, no exaggeration. Stephanie Whitmore, founder of Harbor Tech Solutions, responds with full evidence against false claims made by the family. And just like that, the tone of the comment sections began to shift. First from outrage to surprise, and then fully to support. One person wrote, "I believe the brother. Now I feel stupid." Another added, "The only failure in this family is the hypocrisy of the parents and the brother." Soon after, messages from partners and clients began flooding in. Some offered apologies, some voiced their support. Others said they'd like to continue working with me, as if nothing had happened. And while the world outside buzzed with activity, I sat still. I knew I had won. With Adrian, it was over. As for me, that was only the first chapter of an entirely new story. 3 days after Brian sent the formal legal notice to Adrian, I thought everything would now play out quietly in court. The notice was clear. According to California civil law, we would be filing a lawsuit against Adrian Whitmore for defamation, personal slander, and reputational damage to Harbor Tech Solutions. But I underestimated one thing. Desperation can drive even the proudest man to act in ways no one expects. That morning, just before 10:20 a.m., the internal receptionist called. "Mr. Adrian Whitmore is downstairs. He doesn't have an appointment. He says he's here to negotiate." I glanced at Brian. He was by the coffee counter, and for a split second, he froze, caught in a rare moment of hesitation. Maybe, just maybe, he was still wrestling with that thin, fading line between legal duty and family history. He looked at me silently, asking for direction. My response was immediate. "I'm not meeting him. Stick to the plan." Brian gave a firm nod and stepped out toward the reception area. I stayed in my office, watching through the internal camera feed. And then it happened. Just as Brian informed Adrian that the lawsuit would proceed as planned, he suddenly dropped to his knees in the lobby, right there in front of at least 10 staff members and 2 newly arrived clients. He knelt, hands on his knees, eyes locked on Brian, lips repeating something the cameras couldn't thoroughly pick up. For a few seconds, the entire lobby froze. Time seemed to stop. I didn't look away. I didn't flinch. One thought came to mind, crisp and certain. This must be handled with reason, not emotion. Immediately, I picked up the phone and called Lauren. "Have security keep the area calm, then bring him up here. Brian stays with him the entire time." 1 minute later, the door to my office opened. Adrian walked in, his face still flushed from the stunt downstairs. Behind him was Brian, already holding a file folder, calm as ever. No one sat. They were waiting for me to speak first. The moment Adrian sat down across from me, I took the lead. I looked him straight in the eye and asked flatly, "What do you want?" As expected, he launched into the same tired refrain. His tone softened, as if trying to pull on the last frayed thread of family. "No matter what, family is still everything. I'm your family, Stephanie." I cut in immediately, my voice ice cold. "If this goes to court, not even selling your house will cover what you'll owe." That landed like a hammer. His whole body stiffened. No comeback, just a long stretch of silence. I let that silence hang a few seconds longer before speaking again. This time, slow, deliberate. "I'm willing to let this go, but only on my terms. His eyes lit up with a flash of hope. He leaned forward, almost desperate. Anything. Just tell me. As long as I don't have to go to court or lose the house, I'll do it. I looked over to Brian, then turned back to Adrian and laid it out clearly, firmly. 3 conditions. First, from this day forward, you will not contact me in any form for the rest of your life. Brian will file a restraining order and serve you accordingly. Second, you will go on every single social media platform you use to defame me, and you will post a public apology. Third, you will pay $200,000 in damages, but I won't take the money. Every cent will be donated to an orphan care organization I choose. The moment I finished the third condition, Adrian froze. Then, with a voice so small it almost dissolved into the air, he said, 200,000. That's a lot. Can you reconsider? I didn't flinch. That's up to you. Either you meet the terms or we go to court. He hesitated, fingers twisting together, eyes no longer able to meet mine, and then, voice cracking with defeat, he muttered, but I just lost my job. After everything that happened, I didn't blink. I looked at Brian, then turned back to Adrian with finality. That's your problem. We warned you. You lit the fire. Now you deal with the burn. After both sides agreed, Lauren and Brian immediately got to work. They stayed in the guest room to draft a formal settlement document, clearly outlining all 3 conditions I had set with Adrian's signature included. As soon as the document was finalized, I made one more decision. We would make it public. Lauren looked a little surprised, but didn't question me. She flagged a copy to our internal communications team as urgent. A few hours later, the agreement between me and the man who had once slandered me appeared across the same social media groups where the false claims had first gone viral. The headline was simple and clean. Symphony Whitmore reaches civil agreement with her brother. The comment sections were flooded within minutes, hundreds of replies pouring in. Many praised the way it was handled. This is masterclass crisis control. Thank you, Symphony, for choosing integrity over revenge. But not everyone agreed. One person wrote, "It's family. If you can forgive, you should." Another on the opposite end said, "If I were Symphony, I'd have sued until they lost everything." That night, I read every single one, and when I was done, I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I knew one thing for sure. I didn't need to follow anyone's opinion. I just needed to follow what my clarity had told me was right. That afternoon, Adrian began posting public apologies across all major social platforms: Facebook, Reddit, and Instagram. The posts were well written. No excuses, no deflection. It was clear Brian had helped draft them. 3 days later, I received an email from Adrian. Attached were payment receipts and confirmation of a $200,000 donation to the Orphan Care Organization in San Bernardino, California, the exact one I had specified. After reading it, I turned to Lauren and Brian and said just one thing. Please verify that he made the payment. Both of them left that same afternoon. They went directly to the center, met with the organization's representative, and confirmed that Adrian had shown up in person and fulfilled every part of the agreement. That evening, I sat alone in my office reviewing Harbor's annual profit report. Without hesitation, I signed off on an additional $300,000 contribution directly from the company's earnings for that same organization. Not to balance the books, not to make a statement, but to make one thing clear. I was once a child pushed out by my own family, and I never want another child to grow up feeling that way again. It's been 3 months since the last time I saw them. Everything feels behind me, like an old book that's finally been closed. I've heard bits and pieces from outside sources. Adrian hasn't been able to find work at any company in the area. No one wants to be associated with someone who made headlines for defamation or for kneeling in the lobby of a business he had no right to step into. Eventually, he sold his old house and moved somewhere new. A place where no one knows about the family drama. A place where, if he's wise enough, maybe he can start over without repeating the path that led him here. As for my parents, I know nothing more. After that last encounter, I cut off all contact. They haven't tried to reach out again, not with a court's restraining order in place and fully enforced. These past 3 months, they've been the most peaceful of my life. I still run the company. I still work every day like before, but inside, there's a lightness I hadn't felt in years. A quiet certainty that I'm no longer stuck in the space between duty and damage. Occasionally, a relative will message me, scolding, complaining, or trying to play the mediator. I don't respond. I delete the message, then block the number. And if you've made it this far into my story, I want to say one thing. Family isn't always where you belong. Some wounds shouldn't be excused just because they come from blood. And some relationships, if you keep holding on for the sake of sentiment, will slowly choke the air out of your life. Being kind is a choice, but learning to protect yourself, that's what keeps you alive through the hardest days. Don't be afraid to cut off the poison branch so the rest can grow stronger. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Just follow what your clarity tells you is right. And before I close this chapter, I want to ask you, the ones still here, still listening until the final moments of this journey, was I wrong to choose self-preservation over clinging to a blood tie that had long since rotted? If you were in my shoes, if your family once stood in a room full of people and called you a mistake, if they cast you aside when you were at your weakest, what would you have done? Leave your thoughts below in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your perspective. And if the story stirred something in you, if even a single part of it made you pause, reflect, or feel seen, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share the story so that maybe someone else out there struggling in silence might find a bit of clarity too. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next journey.